Dr. Swati Lotha was giving a presentation on parenting based off of her new book that she had just written. And during this presentation, the Q&A section, a member in the audience went up to the microphone and started to ask a question, but it wasn't for Dr. Lotha. It was for her 16-year-old daughter that had accompanied her for this presentation. And the member asked her, "Do you think your mother's perfect?" The daughter replied, "No, I don't think any parent's probably perfect." And the audience member was poking and prodding along and asked another question. "Could you name one thing wrong with your mother?" The daughter replied, "I could write a book on that." I think we, children, and I think parents too, we often probably felt that way about our own parents. We gripe or we feel embarrassed when we have to walk out in public with them at a certain age, or listen to the things that our parents try to teach us or tell us to do. To even, we have probably those family members or parents that blast their old favorite tunes as they pick us up from school. There's those things that parents are known to do as parents. And as we as kids, or as you as kids, they probably made you squirm a little bit, hide in shame. But we did that because we love you. Our parents loved us. We did those little things because they remind us, they make memories in our life, and we teach our children things, even though they don't want to listen to us, to instill a little bit of wisdom. Hopefully that even though in the midst of those awkward moments, they can look back and say, my parents did really care about me. They weren't trying to ruin my life, but they just wanted to be with me and have those moments with me. And even Swara's words, they probably embarrassed her mother, probably even kind of cut a little deep during that presentation in front of so many people. But there was power in those words from a daughter. So much of a desire was sparked in Dr. Lotha that she formed an even stronger relationship with her daughter. So much that mother and daughter wrote a book together. A book that focused on listening to the children, asking them for their advice in parenting, asking them what do they want to hear from their parents. What would make life a little easier, a little more enjoyable, not so much an embarrassment or awkwardness. And so they wrote a book where they interviewed over 200 children, and this is what they came up with. 4 things that children would have liked to share with their mothers and fathers. Number 1, disagreement is not the same thing as disrespect. Number 2, kids don't need to be told they're the best. Number 3, kids get feedback all the time. Parents should too. Number 4, mothers and fathers shouldn't get so fixated on results. Now, whether you agree or disagree with all these, I believe we could learn something from that. Dr. Swati learned that asking for advice is about checking in with kids, but not putting them in control. Kids would like their intentions and efforts to be recognized. Kids just want to feel loved and respected. Sounds an awful lot like God. Even when we make those decisions and we mess up, we just want that forgiveness. That sounds an awful lot like God too. It sounds especially like the Old Testament, where God is constantly trying to care for us, show his love for his children, his creation. And even when we mess up, still trying to impart a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of teaching to draw us back in so we don't mess up a little bit less. Solomon, or whether you believe it was some ancient Jewish sage, he wrote our text for this morning, hoping to instill a little parental wisdom, if you will, a little sage advice for those starting out in their young life. You see, the book of Proverbs was written in the section known as writings, where we get Psalms, Job, Ecclesiastes, and even it's part of a subgroup that we know as the wisdom literature. They're part of that group to teach us, to remind us of what's important. Wisdom, if you don't know, the Jewish word is known as chokhmah. here's the key thing. It's a feminine noun. That's why when you read Proverbs, you hear about this woman. Wisdom was given a female nomenclature. And that wisdom, that woman that we read about time and time again, is beyond the literary definition of just, knowledge. For the ancient Israelites in early Judaism, it was imagination, it was discipline, it was piety, order, and instruction. It was all of these things put together. That was wisdom for them. It was more than just moral and theological teachings. It was kind of a divine instruction, if you will. But at the same time, it wasn't to take it as face value. What you read is what's going to happen from the divine. No, it was more of guidance. Trying to understand how heaven could be lived here on earth. Hence why we often read Proverbs as that moral instruction. These moral wisdoms were weaved in and out through sayings, through riddles, through poetry, teachings, dialogues. All different ways, because not all of us respond to everything the same way. Not only were they informative, but they help us remember, understand that tradition, knowing how God was a part of his creation, how he's a part of life. For the Hebrew people, Proverbs and those other wisdom literature, they placed God as creator, as divine Lord over all. He was at the center of their reality, and how they understood God was how they interacted with life, how they interacted with creation. And God provided them a little insight through our scripture. You see, for Proverbs, God revealed himself like a winding river with all the tributaries that broke off from that river, coursing through the passages that we read. For the early people, that's how they knew God. That's how they interacted. That's how they learned. It was a chance for them to question, to wrestle, to grow, to nurture their faith. There's beauty, there's purpose in our reading today, because that's how we understand the mystery. That's how we understand the freedom that comes through God. That's how we honor. We remember what these teachings tell us, what they told people so many years ago. It invites us into engaging, to listening, to even testing, to even reform or even question and rebuke, kind of say, no, I don't think that's exactly right. That's what our scripture calls us to do. That's what wisdom calls us to do. Proverbs teaches us, the church, that existence is full of worth, especially if we live wisely in the harmony with God and the creation he set forth. Life can be a gift of wisdom. And that's what we get in our section of Proverbs today in Proverbs 3. It's some of the most easy reading that you'll see, and some of the most theologically clear verses that you could ever encounter. You see, Proverbs 3 was written to those young Jewish men, those young Jewish readers back in the day, teaching them how to live their life, how to act appropriately. Because you see, they were under oppression. They were under a different rule by the Persians. And our text is a reminder, if you follow the rules these way, you're still going to honor God, but guess what? You're not going to get in trouble with the Persians. Sounds an awful like Matthew 22, verse 21, when Jesus is talking about giving what's owed to Caesar and still honoring God. Doing all these things will keep them from harm. And we see these series of instructions. My son. That's a clue for you that are trying to figure out how to read this text. Okay, the instructions are coming when it says my son. That's what's happening there. These lectures, these teachings are to remind us that Yahweh is to be trusted. Yahweh is to be feared. But when I mean feared, I mean revered, honored. Sounds a lot like what we've talked about earlier this morning. trust God, to honor God. Proverbs 3 is that reminder that we're not the masters of our own lives. We're not our own gods, if you will. The benefits of long life and prosperity are part of what the Hebrew calls shalom. We often think of it as the word peace, but it's more than just peace. It's this entire well-being. I think today is a reminder that we have those things that bring out all the best in us, that want us to be the best. As scouts, you want all of that. You want to help young men and women become adults that have these type of wisdom, that have these type of teachings in their lives. That's made possible through faith, honor, and loyalty. These are the common things of verses 1 through 10. Those are the things that the teachers, the sages, Solomon tried to instill upon us. Loyalty to God is expressed through honoring him as divine Lord. Divine loyalty is the virtue that seals our covenant, our relationship with God. You see, the Old Testament knew a thing about covenant theology, how to make a pact, how to have that relationship. And for them, that was the ultimate symbol, was loyalty. If we are loyal to God, then we will be favored by God and the people around us. That was their belief. And trust is that action, the thing that makes it happen, that loyalty happen. It's that practice of faith. It means that we're to rely on God. Trust is the hope in God. That's why you might hear the word piety or holy roller, because they're trying to live out that faith. And when you trust in God while not allowing that wisdom of yourself or even the world, it means when you don't let that happen, when you don't let the world control you, it means you allow the Holy Spirit to take a hold of you. It means the Holy Spirit is going to guide you. And I can't help but think about Scout Sunday. Scouts, that you are here with us. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country and obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. That's the Scout oath. And they will uphold the 12 points that is the Scout law. I can't help but think about that. And think about Proverbs, seeing how they go hand in hand. When we think of a scout, we often think of somebody who has the best intentions at heart, that wants to help somebody. And then somehow we try to screw it up. We try to make it worse. Now, scout can sometimes mean a goody two-shoes, somebody who's over-idealistic. I hate that we've done that. Because you see, a scout has the ability to build bridges where other people can't. We as Christians are supposed to do the same thing. I should have been a scout. I grew up in a small town, smaller than Van Alstyne, for those of you trying to give you a point of reference. My brother did scout for a couple of years, but none of my friends did it, and I should have done it. Especially knowing what kind of badges you could have gotten. Some that are no longer available now, but I should have tried. When I saw there was a badge for atomic energy, I should have joined Scouts right then and there. I don't know how you got a badge in atomic energy, but man, that sounds fun. And then I saw that you could get a badge in pigeon mastery. Imagine now sending messages through a pigeon. That would have been fun. Or marksmanship, masonry, woodworking. If I had known that as a little kid, I probably would have done Scouts. And I can't help but think about looking at who are the famous Scouts that we may know about. We've had several presidents, astronauts that were Boy Scouts, and I can't help but think about Jimmy Stewart. How many people know who Jimmy Stewart is, the famous actor? Most of the old people know. So for you younger people, how many of you saw An American Tale, Fievel Goes West? He played the sheriff dog in that movie. That was Jimmy Stewart's last movie to ever do. And he gave a speech because he was a Boy Scout when he was receiving an award. And he goes on and talks about the 40 words about the Scout's oath. And he says this about honor. He says, there's a good word to start out with. It comes from the old Latin and French word, and its origins indicate dignity without none of us is a whole or complete person. Honor means worth, and has been known to escalate to reverence and higher to veneration. We honor the Lord. By living well, we honor each other. Jimmy Stewart got it. It's because of Scouts. And if you were to read his speech, he goes on and talks about his faith and how Scouts enhanced that. That's why our text is not about the promises, but rather motivation. It's fuel for our faith. It's fuel for that fire. To live for that wisdom, because rewards, it motivates us for those possible rewards. Just like Jimmy Stewart, who was trying to motivate people to join Scouts, to live out a Scout's life. Proverbs motivates us. These instructions don't promise us that those who trust will get A, B, and C, and D, but no. It's a reminder that these promises, they're not necessarily that. But if we bound our life to Yahweh, Yahweh will reveal himself, and we will find joy in life no matter what. We know better. We as Christians should know that. The people of long ago knew that. Proverbs urges us to let that wisdom guide us through the thick and thin, through the downs and through the highs. To enjoy the little things in life, to find those things that will make life better. To hold on to what God gives us. And to keep moving forward, even when we make mistakes, because we have a God who loves us. That's what shalom was all about. That well-being, that all-encompassing thing. When we devalue the wisdom, when we devalue that, we devalue God and the discipline that he tried to instruct on us. Trust in Yahweh. Trust. That's the antidote. That's the antidote to repel selfishness. Trust means that we're no longer in control. Trust means that God is in control and that he has our best intentions at heart. And I can't help but think this is what Proverbs wanted to remind us. If anything you take away from today, remember this. Do not be wise in your own eyes, so that you fail to trust that God's ways are best. Do not reject the Lord's teaching, so that you miss the life-giving riches of wisdom. And lastly, do not lose your sense of judgment and discernment, so that you take away what belongs to your neighbors. If you remember these things, you will preserve life. You will preserve peace. You will preserve the well-being for yourself and for others. Scouts, just like Proverbs, teaches us the value of wisdom, teaches us the value of life, that our actions can influence others, can influence ourselves. It influences our attitudes. And they teach us how we should respond to one another. And for us as Christians today, that's made known through Jesus Christ, because he is at the center of our life. He is the center of everything. He is that ultimate wisdom that is revealed to us. And I can't help but think about Paul. In his letter to 1 Corinthians, he reminded the church when they were bickering, when they were struggling, the wisdom of the cross. When we have that, it makes everything else seem like foolishness. And even when people look at the cross, they see foolishness. But guess what? The wisdom that is the cross passes all understanding, because it's the ultimate source of our wisdom and faith. May we respond now and forevermore.